Welcome back to Armchair Author Chats. I'm your host, Rita Slanina, and today we are talking to the author J.M. Celi, also known as Jamie. He has two amazing titles that we're going to talk about today. And without further ado, let's bring our friend on. Hello, Jamie. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So let's give the audience a little bit of a nice snippet about you. What would you like them to know?
Wow. Well, I write urban fantasy lately these days, and my current two books out are, and including some other short stories, involve around this vampire named Lisa Cooper and her struggle with humanity as she wanders through this sort of dark supernatural world
Oh,
that she's
yeah.
part of.
I love it. I love it. So let's start with a little bit of magic. Can you share the
Hmm.
moment you first felt that spark to write your book?
Yeah, it was funny. It was sort of, I call it the perfect storm because what was happening was, and this was before COVID, so I was still driving into work. I work from home these days.
Okay.
So some friends of mine got me into audiobooks. I was never much of a reader, honestly. Like my 20s, 30s, I could probably count how many books I read on one hand.
Wow.
Nothing. And they were like, you really, you're right, your long commute, get into some audiobooks. And they gave me some titles to recommend and all this kind of stuff. I finally broke down and I was like, yeah. And now I get hooked on these books and I'm reading like back and forth to work while I'm walking around in lunch. So I'm reading. Suddenly my reading intake went from like zero to like boom. Right around the same time, my friend, his spark goes off, whatever his origin story is, I don't know. But he decides he's going to write a book. So he gets a copy of Stephen King's On Writing.
Oh,
So now he's calling me up and he's like, oh, this is so great. And I'm writing a book and I'm doing this many words a day and it's this and it's this. And I know nothing about the craft. I know nothing about writing. Um, so I'm reading all this stuff. And now he's saying, oh, I'm writing this book. And then these things kind of just naturally merge together where the creative juices are just kind of catching on fire. And it just kind of strikes me one day. I'm like, yeah, I kind of want to write a book too. And that
nice.
was several years ago. And so really, it's funny because some people are like, well, I've been writing since I was 9 years old. Like, no,
You're a breakout
I was,
star.
yeah, I was 45 years old when I started writing, like really starting with the craft.
Well, that's
So
amazing. That's an
I'm a
amazing
late,
story.
I'm a late bloomer.
And look at you. You have two titles that are amazing already. Like, it's like it was meant to be.
Yeah, yeah, I think it is. I think it's just, this is kind of my I don't know if my calling, but it's certainly something I'm really really loving.
Oh, wonderful. So your book is a roller coaster of, oh gosh, the vampire genre and the emotional tale of Lisa. What inspired you to write such a captivating storyline?
So I've always loved vampires. As a kid, I've always loved vampires. Usually, you consume that content in monster movies and stuff, Dracula and all that kind of stuff. But when you start getting into vampire fantasy fiction, there's almost like this pie chart where you've got a bunch of vampires in the horror genre and a bunch of vampires in the romance genre,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have some vampires that are like a lot of vampires in urban fantasy, but they're usually kicking around as like someone's friend, like the vampire friend of the sidekick, like right, like if you've ever seen like True Blood, the Sookie Stackhouse novels and stuff like
Right.
that, like the vampires are not are the side characters,
They're almost like a comedic relief sidekick
they
almost.
they can be. So
Yeah.
and then but if you take the vampire and make them the main character, then I almost felt like they're either these kind of like edge lords where they're like, I'm the dark and brooding, sexy person that's 500 years old and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Or they're this someone like the vampire Lestat who's just like, yeah, I'm a vampire and I kill people and
Here's what I
I'm
do.
okay with.
Yeah.
But another nod to Anne Rice, though, she created the vampire Louis from Interview with the Vampire. And I always thought he was much more interesting
Hmm.
because here was a vampire who he was like the first vampire character I ever saw that was like, this is awful. Being a vampire is not great. I don't want to hurt anybody. I can't go out in the sun, and that's terrible. And I
Humanized
don't want to.
them.
Yes, and I was like, that's awesome. Like that drew me in, and Lisa is sort of born of that inspiration where I was like, that's the kind of vampire that appeals to me. Because what would I become? Like if I turned into a vampire tomorrow, the real me, I would be struggling against it. I'd have a hard time. I wouldn't be
Agreed.
some, you know what I mean? So I'm like,
I know I
that's
would have a hard time. I don't think I
I
could
want
do it.
I wanted people to like read that book and think to themselves, yeah, if I was a vampire, I'd have a hard time with this too. And that's what kind
Right.
of what I was going for.
Right. And then here we are with Lisa Cooper.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, can you give us a peek behind the curtain about your writing routine? And do you have any quirky habits when you're writing?
I don't know if anything's quirky. My writing routine's kind of changed over the years. I used to be try to be like very disciplined. Like I will write this many words a day, and
Hmm.
where and kind of get all that going. Um, these days, so first of all, I'm self-published. So a traditionally published author doesn't have the luxuries that I do because they have these things called deadlines, and
Deadlines.
they have publishers going to them and saying we need this book in this many months or whatever. I don't have that, so I have the luxury of being able to have an exhausting day at work and think I don't want to write today. I'm
Right.
going to relax, or I'm going to go on vacation, or I'm going to spend the weekend on a driving around to the beach or something, have a beach day.
Right.
Like so I don't have I let myself go with these kind of like really strict procedures and
Regimented
routines.
routines. Right.
Yeah, and I find that I'm not writing as quickly,
Right.
but when I do finally get to the keyboard and write, it's like a dam burst because all this stuff
Nice.
I've been thinking about these scenes and I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then finally it's like whoosh,
So there's
thousands of
something to be
words.
said about that. Stepping away from the
Yeah.
project, living life, just living
Yep.
life, and then coming back to the keyboard and saying, whoa, wells of information are now pouring out of me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not for everyone, but it's been working for me.
Very wonderful. Very nice. So, publishing a book is no small feat, as we just kind of briefly spoke about. So, what was your biggest aha moment during your publishing process?
Um, this is actually a little embarrassing. So I
Oh, I
mentioned
like it
earlier,
already.
yeah. I mentioned earlier that I wasn't much of a reader until I started really writing, or just prior to starting my writing.
Hmm.
So really, not until my 40s, my mid 40s, where I were really getting into writing. Sorry, reading, and it is embarrassing. But so I started noticing that, geez, all these books and all these stories, they seem to have this sort of flow to them. These sort of like you have the introduction and then the problem happens and then
Yes.
you kind of wrestle with the problem and then the solution and then
And
you
there's the
like so
climactic scenes and
I knew nothing about story beats or three act structure or anything. This is me ground zero. And I started thinking like, yeah, if I start writing, I could follow these little interesting um, these things. I remember I took some of my favorite novels and said, how did they do chapter one? What did they do? And I'm like, there's a structure to this. Like
I think that's great.
but no, it's I think it's silly. Like I should have realized. Like someone must have. This isn't me like reinventing the wheel here. And
You're
then
like, look what I just discovered.
yeah. Well, no. I mean, I
But
didn't.
you know,
I
that's
didn't.
how you do it, though. We typically
Right.
like to write what we're
But then
reading.
like a dummy, as soon as I realized I started like really writing and kind of like peeking my head into the community, I was like, oh, there's tons of books about this where people are writing about story beats and people are giving lectures on it. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I
love
was
it.
like,
I love it.
I'm like, oh, so this is everybody knows this. Okay.
I
I'm
love
like,
that. We got a
you
nice
know, I thought
embarrassing
I had
moment out of you with this. I
I thought
like
I
that.
had discovered like this awesome thing. And I'm like, no, someone's already done this for you. You just read this book, you
Yes.
know,
Take it easy
saves the
on
novel,
yourself. Yeah.
saves the novel, writes a cat, or no, saves the novel, writes a cat, saves the cat, writes a novel, story genius, all this stuff. So
Right.
yeah,
Oh, that's
as soon as
awesome.
that was my aha moment when I realized that there's such a thing as story structures and everybody knows about it except me.
That's awesome. So, can you share any funny, as you just did, or unusual stories that happened while you were writing or promoting your book?
Some of the funniest stuff that happened to me was when I was doing my first manuscript, which still remains unpublished. I was beta reading it, and I got some of the weirdest feedback I ever got. One guy was like, "You need to rewrite this entire manuscript uh, with clarity," and I'm like,
Huh.
and I had only sent him the first 5 chapters. I'm like, my entire manuscript. I'm like, what was confusing? When did you stop reading? What did you hit that made you go, ugh, no?
Right.
He never got back to me, so I'm like, sounds like you just didn't want to read my book.
Maybe that's one we just, yeah.
I kind of put that. I treated that as a one-off. But the
Yeah.
weirdest thing I got was same manuscript. I had introduced this character, a male character. I have a female protagonist. I introduced a male character in chapter 8.
Okay.
I kill this character off in chapter 15. He gets to the death scene, and the notes he gives me was that I fridged him. And I'm like, how is that fridging? And and then because I asked him, I go, what do you mean I fridged him? And
Yeah,
he
let's
sends me
explain
this
what
YouTube.
fridging is first. It's maybe
Yeah,
someone,
so
some
fridging
artists might not
for
know what
anyone,
that is.
sorry, yeah, for anyone watching that doesn't know, fridging it's usually considered fridging a woman because usually it's the male protagonist and the woman is the one being fridged. And this is taken from some Green Lantern comic um, that came out years ago. And why is the name of the woman escaping me that wrote a blog post about it? Um, but anyway, she was like, what? She was basically saying, why are so many authors, usually male authors, killing off women in these horrible ways to be the inciting incident for the hero to rise up and go on the hero's journey and everything like that? Why do you have to like kill off someone's wife or their mother or their whatever and to spur these men into action? And that's why I was confused because I'm thinking, you know, even the gender reversal aside, I'm thinking I introduced this dude on chapter 8. My character was well on her way into doing her thing, the
Mm-hmm.
plot of the story, right? And then I killed him off in chapter 15. So this is way beyond the inciting incident. I'm like, this
Right.
isn't
And so
fiction,
then you're accused of fridging.
yeah, it was so weird. And
Very
I
unusual.
I didn't pursue it because I'm like, okay, thank you for your commentary. We appreciate it.
I like
You
that.
know,
Yeah, that's a good response. Just the high
that was
road.
a
Go,
weird.
thanks. I'll consider it, and we appreciate your feedback because we do. We love our beta readers. We love getting feedback. We don't want to,
Yep.
you know, on
Yeah. No,
anybody.
the guy's taking time out of his life to read my
Right.
story, and I appreciate that.
Right.
It was just
It
really
wasn't
weird.
unusual. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So writing is not always easy. So how do you push through writer's block or the tough days?
Hmm. Anybody who knows me and has watched my YouTube channel, they know I have a lot to say about writer's block. Um, so, in the interest of time, I will just say that it is. I would submit to writer's block with the caveat that maybe unless you're a traditionally published author, because they don't have that luxury. Like
Right.
I've heard of authors where the publishers are like, you have a month to write a book, like literally a month. Um, I'm an independent. I'm self-published, right? So I have the luxury. So if there's something that happens where I'm not in the zone, I first of all, I let myself off the hook. I don't beat myself up about it. I'm not like, oh my God, I have to do. No, I don't have to do anything. I'm going to listen to my body. I'm going to listen to my mood, whatever. Maybe I had a bad day at work. Maybe I'm just got the schlumps or something. I'm not in the zone, I'm not
Right.
into it. It's okay. Not because you're going to come back later and you'll do it when you're ready. And that's okay.
I love that. I love that. So we all love a good story. What is one book, not your own, that you would recommend everyone should read?
This is tough because what book would appeal to everyone? Like I almost feel like it can't be a fiction book because people aren't going to agree on a genre, let alone
Right.
a book, right?
Fair.
Like I don't read horror, I'd be like, nope, not going to read that, um, but so I almost started thinking, okay, it would have to be a nonfiction book, and I'm going to go with this is going to sound so out of left field, but I'm going to go with a book by Neil deGrasse Tyson, Dr.
Okay.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it's called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. And
Okay.
it's actually a very thin book. It's not very long at all. And it describes basically the cosmos and what's going on up in outer space and everything in layman's terms. So if for anyone that's ever looked up in the sky and thought, what is all this stuff? And what's going on out there? And I think that really is everybody. It feels like
Sure.
everyone has looked up, even as maybe it was a child when the last time
At
you did
least
it,
at
but
one point or another, right?
yeah, you look up at the stars and you think to yourself, wow, this book gives some insight into kind of the behavior of all these, the stars and the planets and all the things that's happened, the origin of the universe and all this kind of stuff. And I think it has that broad appeal because I feel like we've all wondered about that kind of stuff. And I'm kind of a science geek, so that's kind of where I went to pick for my pick. But
I love that.
yeah,
No, I like
um,
science. I love the moon and the stars too. I think a lot of
astrophysics,
people could relate to that. Astrophysics for dummies.
astrophysics for people in a hurry.
I'm speaking for myself. I'd be the dummy. But I love it. It's fascinating stuff. So if your book were to be adapted into a movie, who would you dream cast in the lead role of Lisa Cooper?
Oh boy, Lisa Cooper. I really, I don't know a lot of. So she was turned into a vampire at age 22.
Okay.
So I would want an actress who is in her 20s. Um, and I don't really know a lot of contemporary actresses by name. I think like maybe someone like Millie Bobby Brown might spring to mind.
Ooh, yeah, I
Um,
love her.
yeah, she could definitely, especially if they did if they did the Vampires of 1863, which is Lisa in the 19th century when she was an Irish immigrant.
Uh huh.
So if Millie Bobby Brown can do an Irish accent, and she probably can because
Which
I think she's
I
British,
imagine she could. She was there was this
right?
really fun movie I just watched. It was on I don't know Prime or it had
Oh, is
like a
that the one with she
dragon.
was the dragon? That was awesome.
That
I
was so,
love
I
that
watched it
movie.
3 times.
It's
That's how much
so good. Yeah.
I love that. I thought she did brilliant in that. If you guys haven't
And then
seen it,
she did Alona Holmes, who was supposed to be like Sherlock Holmes's little
that was
sister,
great too. I saw those too.
and she had her accent, her normal
Hmm.
speaking accent with that
Yes,
too, which was great.
she was so fiery. I loved it. I
So I
loved it.
think I think she'd make a good Lisa.
I think
Yeah,
so too. I think so too.
yeah.
So, when you're not busy weaving words into magic, what are some of your favorite ways to unwind and have some fun?
Um, I play the ukulele.
Shut up! I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I play the ukulele. That's something. That's probably my other big hobby that I do is play the uke.
You know, a lot
Turn
of
that
you
around.
authors are surprising me with the instruments that you play. I think I'm going to get a
Oh
band
yeah,
together.
yeah.
An
I'm into it.
author-based band. Start trolling the names, guys, so we can figure out,
Hmm.
because we've got a ukulele, a tenor sax, and a violinist. I play piano, guitar, and some bass, so we got a few of those going in there. Anyone play the drums?
Wow,
Let's put out APV for some band members. But you have to be an
that's
author. That's my
awesome.
only requirement, because that's part of the
Yes.
fun.
Yeah.
So one last question:
Okay.
what is your favorite writing snack or drink?
Oh, this is gonna be so boring. Because I don't really eat while I'm writing. Um, I honestly don't. I don't have anything on that I snack on while I'm writing. But I do drink because I get parched for whatever reason. I just kind of
Mhm.
like dehydrate while I'm writing. So I usually just keep a big tumbler, giant tumbler of water. That's really about it.
Well, that
It's
is
not
the
very exciting.
healthiest answer ever. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jamie, so much for being here. Would you like to leave our audience with the details on how they can find your books and on how to find out more about you?
sure. You can go to jmchaley.com to find out about me. It's jmceli.com. There's all sorts of stuff out there about my books, and I've got some character art, and I'm going to be adding another section pretty soon about my events where I'm doing them. They're all going to be local to the Massachusetts area. Um, and
So
then
you
as
hear
far as
that if you're
finding
in the
my book,
Massachusetts area.
for sure. Yep. As far as finding my books, I've got the Unlife of Lisa Cooper and the prequel novella, which is The Vampires of 1863. They are available on Amazon in paperback, ebook, and hardback, but they're also available everywhere books are sold because I go through Ingram Spark and print on demand. They're widely distributed. So you can walk into any bookstore and order them, and they'll be delivered to your house. Even the ebooks are available everywhere, so ebooks are sold because I use drafted digital. So basically, my books are available everywhere.
Wonderful, wonderful. And for more information, links will be in the description below and also in the show notes on the podcast. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Armchair Author Chats. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.